Does your inner critic keep you from experiencing joy? What does your value structure demonstrate about you as an individual? This is part of a 14-part video series that explores how trauma, stress, and anxiety play a pivotal role in health recovery. Hi there, I'm Dr. Chanu Dasari. I'm a surgeon who specializes in reversing gut microbiome dysfunction and autoimmune inflammation. My technique for reversing symptoms in as little as 6 weeks has helped thousands of patients over the years and is called the Mind-Gut Immunity Method. And if you'd like to learn more, visit mgiclinic.com and request a discovery call. Now, many of you know my personal story. In my early 20s, I struggled with autoimmune disease and digestive dysfunction. And I was able to fix inflammation naturally using the same methods that I now use in my patients. But even after all these years, after my recovery from autoimmune disease and digestive dysfunction, I've still struggled with the anxiety and frustration. Why was I so sick? Why did I ignore the early signs? Why did I let stress take over? And more importantly, why did I deprioritize myself in these situations? These lingering questions were important ones for me to answer because they were at the heart of why I became sick in the first place. After working with thousands of patients over the years, I can tell you that the themes of trauma, stress, and anxiety keep popping up. So in the Mind-Gut Immunity Clinic, we've enlisted the help of a personal development coach to help create awareness for my clients to understand how anxiety, stress, and trauma play a pivotal role in autoimmune inflammation and digestive dysfunction. It's a mini personal development workshop, if you will, within the Mind-Gut Immunity Clinic that creates awareness around illness. Our clients work one-on-one with our coach, Virginia, who you'll see here today, to integrate new awareness and thought processes into recovery. I can tell you from personally working with Virginia over the years that this is a much needed addition to the Mind-Gut Immunity Academy. And from the positive feedback I've received from my patients, I know that this is something that can help others in their healing journeys. Today's video is all about generational trauma and how it affects health outcomes and how to overcome it. So how does generational trauma play into all of this too?
So for me, generational trauma is when families pass down their beliefs to their children and we inherit their beliefs, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent. So sometimes we can't even get out of and into our own direction because we've been planted seeds that weren't even ours.
Yeah, like what are some examples of this?
You have to get a job, you have to work 9 to 5 to be successful, and being an entrepreneur wasn't even a consideration because you got a job. I know that was my generational trauma. You get a job, go to work.
Yeah, I actually see that a lot too, right? Like we have a lot of people with autoimmune disease, digestive dysfunction, that a big source of stress happens to be their 9 to 5 job. And not to say that the employer is at fault in any way, but really what we're saying is that, they don't have enough time for themselves. They don't have enough time to like tend to themselves, their own needs, all these unmet needs. And one of the biggest barriers to that happens to be, the way in which they're structured their day.
Yeah, I've had a client even say to me, like, who likes sales? I hate sales, but this is what I do because my family does it. And every single day he's going to work doing something he hates, working 14 hours a day. Like, if you can only imagine, how is that going to take a toll on your body if you're doing something you don't even like to do?
And do you think that it's interesting that you say job, because the generational trauma may also extend to viewpoints on scarcity, resources, money, etc., right? Because a risk tolerance, for example, right?
Yeah. And the feeling of I have no choice, I have to do this. And so their autonomy has been robbed from them. And so then their body starts to break down because they're doing work that doesn't match up with their purpose.
How can people identify what aspects, because these it's sort of this is stuff you grew up with, right? This is stuff that you may not even be aware of. How can you tease that apart? How can you start to understand where this comes from?
at the simplest level, questioning yourself when things are going on and you catch yourself stating a belief, ask yourself, is that still true for me? We often go through our day unconsciously even talking and we don't even hear what we're saying. And so I always tell people literally start observing yourself and start observing your thoughts and asking yourself, do I even agree with that? Where did that even come from? Where did I even learn that?
That's
Just,
interesting. Where did you come from? Or where did it come from?
yeah.
Because really it may be at odds. It may be at odds with where you want to be. It may be at odds at where you should be, where you see yourself going, right? Those sort of thoughts, those thought patterns and why you came here and what you're trying to do. Sometimes the things you inherit tend to be, it's funny. Like we deal a lot with autoimmune disease, right? And digestive dysfunction. And everybody asks me, like, is it genetic? Is it genetic? Well, the trauma might be inheritable, right? The trauma might be inheritable.
Mhm.
But who knows? Like, because a lot of times the autoimmune disease, people are the first people in their families to have it, right? They're the first people to exhibit these signs.
Yeah.
And but if you look back and you think and you pick some of these things apart and you start having these interesting conversations, they'll tell you, oh yeah, like I had a family member or my parents were like this and I'm like this now. And it tends to create some problems going forward.
There's also generational healing, right? Maybe these people are waking up and they're more sensitive to their bodies because it's time to end that generational trauma. We just have to wake up to it. And to back up just a second, I was thinking about the game of telephone. Sometimes even the person who taught you the belief doesn't know where it came from because it was from hearsay, and we don't even have any proof. So how about we get out of the telephone game and start questioning and asking and researching to find out how valid the information was to start off with?
Yeah, I would agree with this. I'm guilty as charged, clearly, because there's cultural beliefs also with this, right? And everyone knows like my folks, they're Indian, and we have a strong sense like where education is highly valued, hard work is highly valued. In fact, hard work is probably more valued than even say earning income. It's like if you're lazy, you can get you can criticize that person that's lazy, but if
Right.
that person is working hard but is still broke, you can't
Yeah.
criticize that person, right? But
Yeah.
really but that's the trauma, right? The trauma is that there's a scarcity of resources. Then that could have been like a multi-generational sort of thing, growing up in a different country or immigrating or whatnot. And though a lot of these beliefs don't hold true, and they don't hold true in a lot of contexts, especially from a scarcity mindset. I think so. One of the biggest generational traumas is this idea that there's not enough, right?
Mhm.
And that you have to do more, and that your time is only valuable when you're productive, when you're doing things for the family, when you're doing things for the home, when you're being productive, really. And where do you start with these conversations? Like, how do you help clients that are struggling with autoimmune disease and digestive dysfunction? How do you help them figure these things out?
Through appreciative inquiry and asking, we can get down to the bottom of who they really are before the trauma. We can never change the trauma, but we can shift the perspective around it. But most of what I see with the autoimmune is that they're really out of alignment with themselves, but they don't even know who they are because maybe they were so busy working, no one took the time and interest to even nurture who they were. So that's part of what our course is, and what I do is really helping hold space for people to get back to who they are so that
Hmm.
they can re-identify with themselves and get back into alignment what's true for them.
Hmm.
Not,
I think
not
I agree. I think getting back into alignment is key, because
right.
when you're not in alignment with your true self, that's when your body sort of fights back.
Mhm.
You'll figure it out one way or another. And
Yeah.
we're seeing this like across the country. Like mental health is starting to make a big huge comeback, and people are starting to value it as like a normal everyday thing. People are asking themselves to question these assumptions. That's why you hear about these like quiet quitting, or like the Gen X, like
Mhm.
the boomers getting mad at the millennials and things like
Yeah.
that. It's because people are waking up to this idea.
that they can be themselves and they don't have to follow those traditions. And it doesn't mean you're not going to be loved, because at the source of it all, we get out of alignment because we're seeking love and secure attachment. But once we become confident within ourselves and we know what allows us to be happy, we can move from a better place. The good news is we're resilient. The bad news is we're so resilient. We learn to live with this pain for so long that the whispers have to become screams. And so it maybe the autoimmune disorder, started with a whisper and now it's no longer able to be ignored.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not like autoimmune disease is an overnight process. I tell my clients this all the time, like, how long were you sick? And the answer is always in two parts. There's a sense that something was wrong for a long time,
Yes.
right? And then there was that day where the diagnosis happened. And
Yeah.
usually those aren't the same day. There's sometimes months, years, even
Yes.
decades apart, and
Sure.
there's a delay. So it's not like this inflammation, clearly it accumulates. Clearly it's not just one thing. Clearly it's stress over time.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not being in alignment over time that causes these problems. And sometimes it's a matter of time when some of these things, when the so-called wheels fall off. Like you just work with a client as young as 18, right?
Yeah.
We've got clients, younger than that, and we have clients that are, in their 70s, 80s, and you can see this happen. You can see this process happen. And when the trigger goes off, when people are dealing with this trauma in a real way, and they're getting this autoimmune disease, the inflammation, the digestive dysfunction, when it's coming to manifestation, every single time when you ask them, hey, like, is there something out of alignment? Is there something that doesn't quite feel right? They'll tell you in their gut, in their instinctual answer is yes. It's always yes.
Yes. And that's what we do, right? And that's why I love the name of your program, Mind Gut, because I think people minimize how much the mind contributes to the gut, how they function together, and how we've been taught to ignore that guttural feeling and go right to logic. And then we can talk ourselves in and out of anything.
And it
So,
also affects immunity, right?
and
It
it
also
affects
affects
immunity. And if you're in fight or flight 24 hours a day, how do you think the body is going to respond to that? So it's learning to find safety within yourself and then owning that. And so that you're not a victim continuously to the trauma where you're having to relive it. You get to take charge of your own thoughts, which
Good.
I know it sounds difficult, but really we all have a birthright to have that.
Correct. We all deserve that.
And we deserve that. And reminding them that they deserve it is what we can offer them.
Going in depth on topics such as these allow us to achieve uncommon healing. We already do a good job at solving gut microbiome dysfunction at the root of inflammation, and we make strides in trying to unwind the perspectives and behaviors that create illness in the first place. And that's how we achieve a lasting recovery. Now remember, we've got 13 other videos on similar topics, so if you found this conversation useful, be sure to check out the other videos. Also share these videos with someone you know who's struggling with a health condition and doesn't know where to start. Sometimes just starting the discussion with them can help them change their perspective on illness. Lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I'm Dr. Chanu Dasari with the Mind Gut Immunity Clinic, and I'll see you next time.